Penn State won the rock fight against Illinois, being able to outplay them at their own game, and I feel like the Nittany Lions should have won by even more points.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Penn State beats Illinois at its own game, being more physical than the opponent, controlling the pace down the stretch, and winning 21-7 with whiteout energy here in Beaver Stadium. This is the Locked On Nittany Lions recap from Penn State versus Illinois. I'm your host, Zach Seyko. This is Dylan Callaghan-Croley from Penn State Rivals, and that's Zane, Brancefield, associate producer to the show. So, I mean, it's an ugly win. It was a rock fight. I personally did not think that, I thought that Penn State was going to have, I guess, a lower percentage of winning if they got into a rock fight, but they end up coming out on top. That doesn't mean that I'm saying that they were going to lose, but the odds weren't as much in their favor by them getting in this kind of game with Illinois, but they dictated the terms. They controlled the pace. Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen combined for almost 200 yards. Allen got to 100. Nicholas Singleton very close in the mid-90s range. But this was not a game that everybody's going to look at and say, wow, it was the greatest victory, but it was because Penn State made a statement in other ways. This was a top 20 team. That's a really good Illinois defense. You still beat them by 2 touchdowns, and you left some points out on the football field, guys. I mean, Penn State should have won this game by a lot more. Dylan?
Yeah, no, that's how I come away with this game. I mean, you look at it, 21-7 on paper, 14-point win. Solid. I mean, anytime you beat a Big Ten team, a ranked team by 2 scores, that's a good win. Mm-hmm. Anytime you keep a ranked team to 7 points, that's a good win. But yeah, I think missed opportunities is the right word. I mean, yes. Penn State, I looked at it prior to James coming to the podium, and Penn State had 9 total drives in this game, and I think 7 of them ended up in Illinois territory. I mean, you get to Illinois territory 7 times, come over with 21 points. It's missed opportunities is what it is. I mean, this could have been a much...
And the penalties.
Yeah, penalties were... I mean, yeah, another touchdown wiped off the board because of...
But they did not lose the penalty battle, actually. Illinois took that one in this game. So.
Yeah.
But still bad.
Yeah,
bad.
Yeah, but I think you look at it, I never felt like, even when it was close, that Illinois was the better team tonight. I thought Penn State was the better team throughout the game, no matter how you look at it. Illinois had that first drive of the game. They went 75 yards. After that, they had about 125 yards the rest of the game. And Penn State offensively had success moving the ball. No doubt about that. Like I said, moving the ball 7 times into Illinois territory. You take away the final drive of the second half, which, 45 seconds I counted. But if you want to take it away, 8 of their 9 true drives they got in Illinois territory. You just got to come away with more than 21 points. You have to find a way to get into the end zone. And the kicking game is now a major question mark heading into the rest of Big Ten play with Sanders Sahaydak missing 2 40-yard attempts. They didn't trust him at 37 because on that 4th and 3 they decided to roll the dice. They came up empty-handed. And they went back to him after that. And then he missed again. And we saw Ryan Barker take the PAT on the final touchdown. I just don't know how much. I don't know how you can roll Sanders Haydak back out there next week against UCLA. I think at this point you got to see what else you got. If Barker struggles, maybe you go to Chase Meyer. But I think you have to give everybody a little bit of a shot here now because Haydak has clearly shown not just this year, but in his career that he just can't get it done at a consistent rate.
Zane, I want to know your thoughts. The defense through 4 games, 9 second half points allowed. That is really good. When the offense actually sputtered this time around, the defense stepped up and made a statement. Again, 7 points against a top 20 Big Ten team. But are you looking at the offense that they disappointed? Which weighs more on you? That the offense disappointed today or that the defense showed out?
I think it's overall, I think this team just complements each other really well. They can pick each other up when they're down.
Good point.
Obviously, KJ Winston out, Dom DeLuca out, which also hurt today for the defense, but yet they still pushed through. We saw a lot of Tamir Robinson, Dakari Nelson. I thought they played solid today.
Kobe King had a really good day. Linebacker stepped up big.
So I was very pleased with them. I thought the defense did well. And I think it shows, like, this Penn State defense has gotten better this season. I'm not about to say they're a top 5 defense in the nation, but they have definitely shown progress. They've gotten stronger. They look at their weaknesses, but still they need to learn how to tackle in big plays. They had a few times. If they had a tackle, it would have saved them 8 yards. They would have been sacked for a TFL, like 3 yards behind, and they ended up getting close to a first down, sometimes even more. And I think that's like kind of unacceptable at Penn State Big Ten D1 level. Like, you have to make those tackles. I understand you'll miss a couple, but can't be that consistent. And Penn State's defense needs to figure that out. I thought the secondary was decent today. Obviously they had more passing yards than rushing yards, but that was because Altmaier was sacked a lot in the backfield. Mm-hmm. But I thought overall AJ Harris had his first career interception. That was very good. Also, just overall, I thought the coverage was pretty good. They brought a lot of pressure. The Penn State defense is very good in the blitz. I will stand by that. I thought
they need to do it more.
Absolutely. I think they need to do it more. Denai Dennis Sutton's been way too quiet through the season, but Abdul Carter, I think, is starting to figure it out, and hopefully they can build off this win for the next couple weeks before they head out to USC and play UCLA even next week.
So let's flip it over to the offense, because it wasn't a great day. This is a group that I guess maybe benefited from some easier competition. West Virginia's defense is not world class. Bowling Green, Penn State put up 30-plus points against them. Obviously, we saw what Kent State was with all the records that they had set for the school, for school history, right? Drew Aller did revert back to his old self, I think, in this game. Definitely, it was a little more frequent than I would have liked it to be. He didn't turn the football over. He allowed Penn State to stay in the game. I also think Penn State's offensive play calling was a little pedestrian because they did not know what they had in Sanders Sahadak for the remainder of this game. So they didn't take as many risks. They also just kind of, again, they beat Illinois at its own game. Keep away. Control the pace of the game. Win the time of possession battle. Run the football at them and dare them to stop it. So Drew Aller wasn't needed in this game, but I point to some of the plays where he misses a wide open receiver. He leaves his read a little too soon. Trey Wallace is open in the back of the end zone, and you watch the replay and you see it, and Drew Aller looks away from Wallace the second he breaks open. That was his first read. He didn't give it enough time, and Drew Aller is guilty of that a little too often, Dylan.
Yeah, I would definitely say he reverted back to some of last year's.
He didn't turn the ball over.
He did not,
which was good.
He did not, and the guy on the other side of the field did. Late, twice. Was that
pick six, the fumble?
Yeah. Drew played a quality game, not a great game. I think it was the worst game of this 4-game season, but that's
easily.
But at the same time, if that's his worst game, Penn State's going to win a lot of games this year. Because it was still a very winnable effort. He was still efficient. I think he completed still around 65, 70% of his passes. Had 180 yards, touched. They're all rushing touchdowns. No touchdowns today for him, but he was efficient. But yeah, I mean, some happy feet, some missed guys. I think you look back at that DPI that happened down on this side of the field late in the game.
Another one. Good point.
His deep balls are obviously, the arm strength is phenomenal. He can chuck it 50, 60 yards in the air, no problem. But the problem with his deep passes, I think we have seen, is
too much air.
He rainbows it a little bit too much. Yeah. He's going to have to start flattening those throws out against better teams. If you want to beat the Ohio States of the world, those are going to have to be much more dart-like passes instead of rainbow passes, just because Ohio State's secondary, or those secondaries that have that level of talent, are going to take advantage of those rainbow throws. It wasn't a great game from Drew, but it was still a quality game. The rushing
attack was good enough today.
Yeah, the rushing attack was obviously great. Penn State, I think, has shown they're going to be consistently dominant team on the ground. Offensive line, I thought, was really good today.
Had a really good day.
Not facing a world beater defensive line by any means, but that being said, they went out and did what they had to do against a pedestrian defensive line. They went out and dominated. Allowed 2 sacks, I think, on the day, but I think you can argue one of them was on Drew. He had
coverage sack.
Yeah, a coverage sack. He had opportunities to maybe get the ball away. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, the big takeaway is just going to be the missed opportunities. Just you got to be able to finish. That's what Nick Singleton was talking about post game too. Was it was good today, but there's a lot to work on. They got to figure out how to finish in the red zone. Like I said, it's up 7 drives in the Illinois territory, 21 points. You're not gonna score 7 touchdowns every game when you get in opposing territory. But left 6 points out there with field goals and a couple of drives. They're probably could result in a touchdown as well. So missed opportunities for Penn State's offense today, but it was still good enough to get the win. And at this point, 4-0, you take this win against a top 25 opponent. You look across the country this week again. A lot of people struggled against inferior opponents.
Yeah.
Miami with Virginia Tech, Ole Miss lost to Kentucky. Michigan almost moved to Minnesota. It's hard to win in college football. It's hard to win no matter if you're at home or on the road. And they went out and beat a really well-coached Illinois team today, and a team that usually is pretty hard to beat. And like you said, they beat them in their own game, and that's important. Penn State has shown so far this year that they can win games in multiple ways, and you're going to need that if you're going to be a playoff team. So I think it's a big one.
Gentlemen, let's wrap up with this. And Zane, I want to get your thoughts first. Penn State has a favorable matchup, and favorable I don't even think begins to describe. The game against UCLA next weekend, that is a 12 Eastern kick for a California team in UCLA to come here to Beaver Stadium, where there's just not a lot to like about that team. It's a total intense rebuild. Deshaun Foster's a brand new head coach. They have Eric Bieniemy. But from what I've gathered, his system's just a little too complicated to pick up right now. UCLA is coming into this game with not a lot, even though it's in the middle of the season. They don't have the highest expectations remaining, whereas Penn State still has everything to achieve in front of them. Zane, does the conversation now pivot to USC? Do you look past the UCLA from this perspective, from the reporting perspective and analysis? I know Penn State still has to beat that Big Ten team in UCLA, but this is definitely a prime look-ahead spot when I'm anticipating Penn State to at least be a 24-point favorite. They might even be a 4-touchdown favorite when it comes to the Vegas spread.
I think you do kind of look past UCLA. I think you need to kind of evaluate a lot of your problems. I think you try to use UCLA kind of like a Kent State, where you try to fix your issues, your defensive problems, try to work on your tackling. Essentially, make UCLA a glorified scrimmage so that your guys can get better.
It's bold. It's a Big Ten team, but I get what you're saying. There's just not a lot to like about this UCLA team.
Yeah, you got to work on your defense. You got to work on Drew Allard slowly going through his progressions. You just have to work on a lot of things overall. Hopefully, you get some of those injured guys back, like your KJ Winstons, your Dom DeLucas, and hopefully they'll be prepared for USC, which obviously is going to be a big, tough opponent for them, especially first game out on the West Coast. So I don't think they need to completely overlook UCLA. I think they just need to evaluate how they look at it and not be like, oh, it's going to be an easy win or it's going to be difficult. I think they just need to use it as an assessment for how they are so far in this season, because whether they're easy or hard, they are a Big Ten team, and Big Ten teams are always difficult to win.
Dylan, what is your, feeling as of right now with USC that had they closed out a victory against Wisconsin. Wisconsin was in it for the most part, but I knew that plane ride would catch up to Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Just kind of in 60 seconds or less, what are your thoughts right now on USC?
Yeah, I think the Trojans are still going to be a challenge, a big challenge for this Penn State team. I mean, I think we've seen the Trojans have struggled with the Big Ten physicality a little bit over the last 2 weeks. But, I mean, they were down, 11 points to Wisconsin at one point today.
Yeah.
Came back and won that game pretty easily in the second half. I definitely have questions, because as you look at Illinois today, they had success in the passing game a little bit, especially in that first half. A lot of teams are taking advantage of Penn State with those slants, and James Franklin has talked about that as much today. The problem with USC is right up there with Ohio State and Oregon when it comes to the talent on the outside and the speed that they're going to bring. You can let them have success on those slants. You're going to be waving goodbye to them as they run down the field. So I mean, I have questions about how the secondary is going to hold up against that level of a wide receiver room, because we haven't seen Penn State face that level of wide receiver room.
Zachary Franklin and Pat Bryant definitely, they were tough.
They were tough, absolutely.
Yeah.
But last time we saw Penn State face a wide receiver room this good was Last year in the Peach Bowl against Ole Miss, before that against Ohio State. Both those games haven't gone in Penn State's favor. It should be I think that's going to be the matchup that I just focus on up until that. I still think Penn State can win that game. I think USC is not a elite team by any means, but I think they're still a very good team. Going to give this Penn State team a challenge. That plane ride is going to be tough.
Yes.
So we'll see how it all goes. But first, I think obviously Penn State has focus on UCLA next week. Obviously, should be a game that they win handedly, considering all the circumstances. UCLA has been traveling all around the world.
Yeah.
Or
it's been
North
bad
America.
for them.
Hawaii, LSU, back to the West now to Penn State. That team
9 a.m. Pacific time kickoff.
9 a.m. kickoff for them. That team is going to be tired, both physically, mentally. I just don't know what UCLA is going to be able to bring in that game themselves. But Penn State's had those games in the past where we believe they should, run away with a victory easily, and they don't. Focus on next week. But I think, that USC game is definitely on everybody's mind a little bit more than the UCLA game, and it's going to be tough. But got to see what next week brings first, and then we can talk about USC.
Well, you still got to go 1-0. I think that's a good point, but I also want to set up what the schedule looks like in the next 2 weeks for Penn State, with UCLA not being its best opponent and USC kind of being that turning point for this season, because if you're still undefeated after USC, then Big Ten championship comes into the conversation. Ohio State showdown. Would that end up being a night game? Is another possibility. You could see three whiteouts if Penn State is in prime position, undefeated versus undefeated. I know I'm looking way further ahead here, but this is the first turning point of the season for Penn State, is that USC game.
Yeah, and if I may, two things. I think Penn State, obviously a better team than Wisconsin this year. When they go to Wisconsin later this year, I expect Penn State to win that game. That being said, I think this Penn State team is also better than the Michigan team that beat USC 2 weeks ago in Ann Arbor. Of course, it's a little different when you have to go to USC to play that game. But Penn State, Michigan's offensive line this year is good, not great. I think this Penn State offensive line is better. We saw how Michigan's offensive line was able to handle USC in that game. If Penn State can run the ball in that game, I think Penn State's going to have a pretty good chance to win. But the other thing I'll add about that USC passing attack is I think that USC passing attack is going to tell us a lot too about what we should expect in early November when Ohio State comes to town against Penn State in a game which, if Penn State walks in that game undefeated, we could be talking about potentially a top 5 matchup, top 3 matchup, and perhaps the driver's seat in the Big Ten. But that's down the road still. Penn State has a couple games.
It's the possibilities if everything goes well. I think when the ultimate takeaway from this, the struggles on offense, still some question marks about defensive end, but it's defense, but it's starting to find its rhythm under Tom Allen. Penn State's biggest enemy is Penn State. It is Penn State. They clean up. They make those small improvements. They cut down on the penalties. Those mistakes that were so controllable and preventable, as Dylan had mentioned, if Penn State fixes those things, they are right in the thick of it for the college football playoff and these prime games that they have with Ohio State, USC that are on the horizon. That's going to do it for this Locked On Nittany Lions recap. Dylan Callaghan-Croley of Penn State Rivals, Zane Brancefield, associate producer to the show. I am Zach Seyko, your host of this podcast. Let us know your thoughts down in the comments section. Please leave a like on it, share it with friends and family, and for more Penn State football content and all your favorite Penn State sports teams, keep it right here on Locked On Nittany Lions.